OnlyFans has created a situation where there's essentially like, it's not just a passive consumer anymore, right? You're actually like forming some kind of relationship with the content creator. So I'm addicted to Findom and OnlyFans. I'm a 27-year-old virgin male. I've been addicted to porn since I was 13. I just recently found out about NoFap a few weeks ago and have been trying to turn my life around. But I'd say 4 months ago, one of the girls I subscribed to on OnlyFans said I should try Findom to see if I liked it. And long story short, I somehow got addicted to Findom and I can't stop. I've probably wasted over $3,500 on Findom and OnlyFans since then. I sometimes feel like I can't get out of this addiction because it's so easy for me to get triggered and lose control. I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with Findom, but it's basically humiliating men for money. I'm not sure how I got into it. The few girls I have interacted with in the past over text and in real life kind of laughed and made fun of me because I'm short and still a virgin. I've had a bad experience with women in my life, and sometimes I feel like no woman would ever want me. I'm thinking these reasons could be the root of this addiction. What do y'all think? I know this might sound weird, but I just wanted to inform people to do not try Findom. It's way worse than just porn addiction, and it's depressing. I really need someone to encourage me to abstain from this, and I'd appreciate it if someone could. Okay. So the first thing is that this is a post from the NoFap subreddit, which I think can be a good subreddit for people to kind of get support. So we also want to, it's not from our subreddit. But there are a couple of things. I really like this post because I think it highlights a couple of really important issues that we're facing right now. So the first is that pornography is evolving. I know it's kind of scary, but so what used to be simple pornography is now evolving to take advantage of so many other psychological vulnerabilities and neuroscientific niches. So we had pornography back in the day, right? And we know that there's different kinds of pornography that people would get into. But what we've started to create now in sort of the realm of pornography are some of these other evolutions. And the reason that these things are evolving is because it's almost like a Darwinian situation where someone kind of comes up with a particular idea and then the market basically selects for the things that are the most successful. And why are these different things successful? It's because they're taking advantage of certain psychological needs that people have. So one example of this is OnlyFans. So why is OnlyFans so incredibly successful? I think a big part of it is simply that if you thought about pornography, all you could be in pornography was a passive participant. You could be a consumer, right? You couldn't actually participate. You could just consume the pornography. So you can watch it, but there's no interaction. There's no kind of relationship that develops. Or if a relationship does develop, it's wholly within your head. And along comes OnlyFans, which takes pornography and then adds an element of a real relationship to it, right? It adds an element of parasocial relationships. So now it's not just a random person that is triggering some kind of neuroscientific response to erotic pictures. Now it's I can interact with this person, and even in this person's case, the person on OnlyFans is making recommendations to me. So I'm able to form a relationship. So when you take all of the things that are addictive and reinforcing about pornography, and what I mean by that is just visual imagery and sounds of sexual things, which activate our brain and release dopamine and all that good stuff, allow us to do things calm down our amygdala and numb out our negative emotions and internal pain. So that old school porn could do all that. Now, when you have OnlyFans, you have the capacity to form some kind of real relationship with this person. You can interact with them. They'll respond to you. You can request things. Sure, there's a price tag for all that stuff, but OnlyFans has created a situation where there's essentially it's not just a passive consumer anymore, right? You're actually forming some kind of relationship with the content creator. We see that parasocial relationship on Twitch as well, right? So this is the way that the internet is evolving, where people are starting to form relationships with people online. Now, do I think that that's wholesale a negative thing? Not really, because I do think that this is a good example of we can use this tool, at least in my opinion, you're welcome to disagree, for good or for evil. The fact that you can connect to other streamers, like, so I still remember, a lot of people, when we do interviews or when people watch streamers, they'll connect with the streamer in some way, even be inspired by the streamer in some way, interact with the streamer in some way. And sometimes that can actually lead to like positive impacts, right? So one thing that I really appreciate, the whole purpose of this stream today is that people are posting questions that give me the opportunity to weigh in on things that are important to you guys. So I don't think that this phenomenon is by definition bad. I think most things in humanity and most scientific advancements are tools that can either be used for good or evil. So let's talk a little bit about Findom in this person's particular situation. So this person kind of says, for all of you out there, don't try Findom because it's way more addictive than regular pornography or even OnlyFans. And so then the question becomes, what determines whether a particular kind of pornography or like pornographic thing is more addictive or less addictive than something else? And what I've sort of found after, working with a bunch of people is that there's a set of psychological vulnerabilities that any given human being may have. And now what we're sort of discovering is that there's an array of different like sexual or pornographic like products that can tap into each of those vulnerabilities. And the same is actually true for like video games, because not everyone plays the same kind of video game, right? And so there's a lot of interesting research that's coming out of the University of Toronto. So they developed this model called Brain Hex, which basically looks at a personality analysis and how certain personalities of people will actually prefer certain kinds of video games. And so this kind of thing is also true for like other things on the internet. So some people get addicted to YouTube. Some people get addicted to Reddit. Some people get addicted to TikTok. Some people get addicted to Facebook, right? So there's something going on where there are a lot of different products and services out there. And depending on your individual vulnerabilities, or not even vulnerabilities, it could be personality. That's, your individual characteristics, let's call it that. You're going to get addicted to a particular thing. So what's going on in this situation, and why is it that people get addicted to Findom? So I'm not sure about this person because I haven't really interacted with them. But in my experience, there are a couple of really, really important things at play here. And the first thing to understand is that a fundamental tenet of human psychology is that validation matters more than reassurance. So let me explain what that means. So when I'm a psychiatrist and I'm working with someone who's suicidal, what the default human idea is that if someone is suicidal, you should say, if someone says, I have no reason to live, the default response is to say, that's not true. You have so many reasons to live. Look at how awesome you are. You've got this, 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 and this. And what we know from a scientific perspective is that that is not very effective at reducing that person's suicidality. What is more effective than that is actually validation. So I know it sounds kind of weird, but as a psychiatrist, what I've personally found to be more effective is to, when I sit with a person who's suicidal, is to understand, okay, like really listen to them and say, I can see why you're suicidal, because the truth is that there is a lot of stuff in your life that isn't going well. And I have to actually validate that. I have to start by meeting them where they're at. I don't start by assuming that they're wrong and incorrect. I start by assuming or trying to understand what is in their mind that helps them come to that conclusion. And the cool thing about offering a validating perspective is then that actually makes it more effective when I say, hey, I understand that you don't feel like you have a whole lot of reasons to live right now, but I'm going to respectfully disagree. And I do think that you have a lot of reasons to live. Is it okay if I make my case to you? And so that's actually far more effective because human beings on a very fundamental level are looking for validation. And this isn't just about suicidality. Like, we actually know that this is a very fundamental part of like human emotion and like the way that our human brain is wired. So as an example, if you look at studies on kids, okay, and if you want to freak out a child, the easiest way to freak out a child is to have a completely neutral expression. And neutral expressions like really, really freak people out. I know it sounds kind of weird. What does a neutral expression have to do with validation? Because a neutral expression validates nothing. So I know it sounds kind of weird, but we know that, when a kid stumbles and falls down, if they start crying and they're sad about it, and as a parent, what do? We pick up the child and we say, oh, no, did baby get hurt? Oh my God, poor little baby. It's okay, baby. I'm so sorry you got hurt. Oh, show me where the boo-boo is. Let me kiss the boo-boo and make it better. So if you look at that kind of response, it's a very validating response and it works really, really well. When kids grow up with non-validating responses, they tend to end up with attachment issues. So we have a couple of videos about that. There's some stuff about that in Dr. K's guide if y'all are more interested. So these kids grow up to be anxious. And if you look at so there's a video on the anxious personality. And some people just have anxious personalities, and those personalities come from a lack of validation when growing up. There's also another really interesting thing about, so there's just kind of a side note from medicine. So one of my mentors was once telling me that, you can have psychosis, which is like hallucinating and things like that. But psychosis is not a diagnosis, it's a symptom. So sometimes psychosis can be caused by schizophrenia. Sometimes it can be caused by depression. So how can you tell whether psychosis is caused by schizophrenia or whether it's caused by depression? There's a complex diagnostic process. But there was a really interesting thing that one of my mentors told me. And they're like, there's a simple limbic test. So it's kind of a way to test your gut to determine whether the psychosis you're seeing is due to depression or schizophrenia. And so what my mentor told me is ask yourself this question if you're sitting across from a patient. If they were on the subway and there was a seat open next to them, would you sit down next to them? And I know it sounds kind of weird, but it's actually a very, very good limbic test. Because people with schizophrenia, I know it sounds kind of weird, but even when you see them on the street, you can sort of tell. And so how is it that your brain can tell the difference between someone who has schizophrenia and someone who doesn't? It actually comes down to flattened affect. So affect is the facial expression of emotion. And so when people have schizophrenia, their affect gets blunted. So their face becomes really, really neutral, and it sets us on edge because what happens in our brain is we don't really know what to expect from this person. So when when you can read someone's emotions, it actually makes you reassured in some way. And so blunted affect, flattened affect, and there's something about them that just sort of triggers alarm bells and makes people uncomfortable. It happens with kids too. So if you look at a kid with a neutral expression, it's going to be very invalidating for what they're feeling, right? Because if they're happy, you're not validating that. If they're sad, you're not validating that. And it's going to freak them out. So this is the key thing to remember is that validation is a very, very core thing that human beings are looking for. So now circling back to the Findom, why is it that this stuff is potentially more addictive than OnlyFans or regular pornography? And if we look at that person's post, we see that this person already has a confidence issue, right? I'm 5'4", women will make fun of me, I'm a virgin. They even identify in the first sentence of their post, I'm 27-year-old virgin, right? It's the second attribute, even before male. So this person identifies with the idea of being a virgin. So this person identifies with sort of being someone that is going to be rejected by women. And along comes Findom, which are paying women to humiliate him, right? So why would someone do that? Why would someone spend more money than maybe they have or they feel comfortable with to have someone treat them like crap? What kind of reinforcement are you getting there? Because it's creating a negative emotion in them, but it's also highly, highly addictive or reinforcing behavior, right? So what's going on there? And I think essentially what's going on is that it's incredibly validating, right? Because if we have a particular view of ourselves and someone else takes that view to the extreme and they're offering an extreme form of validation. Because if you're a 5'4" virgin and you don't feel like you're a good person and you don't feel like anyone will ever treat you well, you will actually pay money to someone to reinforce that idea with you. It's the same reason why we have cognitive biases for people who are narcissistic, right? So people who are narcissistic will seek validation from wherever they can because finding concordance with the outside world is really what our brain craves. And so if you have a self-esteem problem, be really, really careful because if you find something that will reinforce your idea of low self-esteem, you will actually gravitate towards it. We also see this in people who have had abusive relationships because a lot of people wonder why on earth does this person keep on getting into relationships with abusive people? And the short answer, I'm oversimplifying stuff. It's obviously more complicated than that. But the short answer is that when people have been abused, especially when you have childhood abuse, you develop an identity of being not worthy, right? And then something really bizarre happens if you have that identity of not being worthy and that like you're not a good person, and you enter into a relationship with someone who treats you with respect. The bizarre thing is that people don't feel good about that. It actually creates a ton of anxiety. They don't actually like it. What happens in the mind of someone who's been abused, who enters into a healthy relationship, is like they get really confused and they become paranoid. They're like, why is this person treating me this way? Like, what is going on? Like, when is it going to change? Like, why are they saying this to me? What's their game? What are they trying to get? I don't understand. This doesn't make sense. Because our brain has developed this idea of what to expect from other human beings. And when things don't line up, it makes us deeply uncomfortable. The flip side of that coin is validation, right? So like if you think about, I don't know if you guys have been in this situation, but I remember when I was in school, like, and I got bullied, like there were times where I would engage in being the recipient of bullying because it like made sense to me, right? Like, because that's my job, is to be bullied. Like those are the people who are like the jocks and the captain of the football team, and I'm the loser. So I'll even engage in situations that replay that kind of idea. There's also research on this from the psychotherapy. So there's this idea called the repetition compulsion, which is like, there's some really interesting papers written about that if you guys want further reading. But I think that it's kind of interesting because essentially what's happening with like these evolutions of pornography is that there are these kinds of vulnerabilities. And if you have the vulnerability where you feel like you are unworthy of a woman's attention, and then you start paying a woman to give you the kind of attention that you feel you deserve, it's going to be incredibly validating and incredibly addictive. So then the question becomes like, what do I do about this? I don't think abstinence from the thing is sufficient. So is it a step in the right direction? Absolutely. But trying to abstain from an addictive behavior without understanding the roots of the behavior tends to be the recipe for relapse. And we've seen this time and time and time again. Like, I've seen this as an addiction psychiatrist where people will like, say like, okay, this is the last time, like, I gotta quit. But they don't actually do the work to figure out. It's not the fact that you need to quit. What you really need to understand if you want to overcome an addiction is not the fact that you need to quit. It's to understand what the addiction does for you in the first place. What is the addiction doing for you? What is the purpose it serves? What is the advantage that you gain from engaging in this addiction? And once you start to explore that, once you get to the roots of where the addiction is born from, where it comes from, and as you start to address those things, the actual addictive behaviors will start to like wither. They're like leaves on a tree where once you take out the roots, the leaves themselves, that's what you see, that's what you experience. They will all start to automatically wither once you take the root of the problem out. So if y'all are struggling with some kind of, new addiction, and I've seen so many of them, you got to understand that like this is happening for a reason, right? That like the internet is a place where it allows for a lot of Darwinian selection. We see this for video games, we see it for content distribution platforms, and we even see it for pornography. And the kind of pornography that you get addicted to, it's not just pornography addiction, right? It's not one thing. There's actually a different kind of psychological process, whether you're addicted to pornography or you're addicted to OnlyFans or you're addicted to Findom or you're addicted to another thing. All of those things are going to be working on your brain in slightly different ways. And so if you want to overcome those specific addictions, it involves understanding what is this particular manifestation of pornography doing for me? What is the psychological vulnerability that it's kind of exploiting and take advantage of? What is it doing for me that other kinds of pornography don't do for me? And once you understand what those fundamental psychological needs are, then you can start working on them. And as you work through those fundamental psychological needs, the need for pornography or whatever you're into will actually start to reduce. Questions? So how do you figure out what your needs are? So that's a really good question. So I'd say that, so the first thing is you can definitely work with a therapist. I saw a couple of posts that people were saying like, my therapist was like, just masturbate less. I'm sorry you got a therapist like that. Sucks. You can absolutely work with a therapist for pornography addiction. There are people that sort of specialize in it and things like that. But I'd say that you can even do a lot of this work on your own, right? So like you can just ask yourself like, on a given day, like let's say you've got Findom versus OnlyFans versus like pornography. And you'll notice that you're gravitating towards one versus the other. So when you gravitate towards it, I know it's kind of weird, but just ask yourself the question, like, how does this make me feel compared to something else? So if, let's say, your problem is like OnlyFans versus like, let's say, Pornhub, okay? And so then ask yourself, like, what is it about OnlyFans? What do I feel when I watch OnlyFans that, like, what do I feel? How is this different? And this is where, like, meditation can actually be really helpful. I'm not saying meditation for the purpose of just meditate and then it'll get better. The purpose of meditation is to learn a systematic way of introspection, right? So you, like, kind of close your eyes and, like, you kind of think about Pornhub for a second. And then, like, you kind of, like, think, okay, what is this going to do for me? What feels unsatisfying about it? And then if you look at something like OnlyFans, and then, like, you can kind of ask yourself the question there too, what feels so satisfying about this? What is it about this that really draws me in? And what you'll find is probably something along the lines of, like, I feel noticed here. I feel like I have a relationship. I feel a connection to this person. And then what you kind of tunnel down into is that, okay, so, like, it's not just pornography, it's like pornography plus connection. So what I really want is, like, some kind of sexual relationship in which, like, I feel connected to the other person. And once you become aware of your own needs, that's the first step to actually overcoming them. I do think that this is where, like, a systematic approach and also working with an individual like a therapist, I don't know if this is really, I want to say that this is probably outside of the realm of coaching. So coaches do have a lot of experience with people who are, addicted to pornography. It's like a big part of our community. And at the same time, I think really at that level, you may be better benefited by a therapist as opposed to a coach, but you can always give coaching a try. But I think it's just doing good introspective work, right? It's like really looking at yourself and asking yourself, what is it about this that really attracts me? Are all addictions bad? Yes, I'd say so, because I'd say the definition of an addiction is something that impairs function. So a lot of people in the early days of Healthy Gamer would ask me, back when we talked primarily about video game addiction, how do I know if I'm addicted? And the short answer is, if it causes a problem, it is a problem. So how do you draw the line between, like, a healthy amount of pornography use or an unhealthy amount of pornography use? If it starts to cause problems in your life, like it prevents you from engaging in relationships, if it prevents you from doing other things, if you become dependent on it for emotional, like, suppression or emotional coping, then it's a problem. So if it causes a problem, it is a problem. Does the addiction go deeper than I'm lonely and want a girlfriend? Maybe, right? That's not something that I can answer. So this is, like, what we try to do at Healthy Gamer is, like, there isn't a answer to this question. So this is why, like, our approach at Healthy Gamer is not like, and this is what the internet does, right? So, like, the internet will have, like, a blog. And in the blogger, the person is like, here is how you fix this problem. Or you'll have someone who's like, one of these success gurus who's like, here's the formula to success. It's a video course that you can purchase that's going to be the same for every single person out there, because it's a guaranteed formula for success. If you don't like it, your money back guaranteed. Here's how I make 18 figures a month. It's the formula for success. So everyone out there is asking for what's the right answer? So our approach at Healthy Gamer, and this is a big reason why Dr. K's guide was created the way that it was, is Dr. K's guide is not linear, right? It's like, because the idea behind Dr. K's guide is that one answer is not going to work for every person. So if you're struggling with depression, there's going to be clinical aspects of it and non-clinical aspects of it. What does your depression manifest as? Is this a sense like, are you depressed because you've fallen behind? Are you depressed because you have protective hopelessness? Are you depressed because you grew up in an environment with conditional love, where your sense of worth is tied to your accomplishments? So you can't learn how to be happy unless you're successful. So what is the origin of your depression? Because for different people, it's going to be different. And this is why what we try to advocate, this is why we answer questions like this. This isn't just like, here are the features of pornography addiction. We'll sometimes do that as well. But we try to answer these specific questions because the truth is that pornography addiction is not monolithic. It's not one disease. It's actually a plethora of different diseases that affect people in unique ways. It's the same reason why addiction is not one disease. People have a drug of choice, right? Some people get addicted to alcohol. Some people get addicted to cocaine. Some people get addicted to marijuana. And each of these substances interacts with us in a different way. The substances are also a little bit different because it does appear that there's a genetic vulnerability to particular kinds of addiction. Unclear whether that's true in pornography or not. But what I really have seen is that if you want to like overcome your pornography addiction, you have to take an individual approach. You can use these general principles, but that's why like in Dr. K's guide, like a lot of his exercises, right? That's why we have a coaching program. And we started with the coaching program and then did Dr. K's guide second, because what we really found is that to create substantive change in your life, you need a personal approach. There isn't a formula to success. There's just your formula to success. Your challenges, your genetic makeup, your circumstances, your living conditions, your traumatic experiences, your strengths, the things that you're good at, the things that you're passionate about, the things that you're inspired by, all of those are highly individual. So if you want to put your life together, it involves understanding all of those factors. You know, a walkthrough only works if everyone has the same, if everyone is playing the same game and starts from the same location. You guys get that? The only reason we can have a stock walkthrough on the internet is because everyone spawns in the same place in a video game. You can't create a walkthrough when there are 1,000 different spawn points. It's impossible. So this is the big problem, is that like everyone out there is giving stock solutions to shared problems, but it's been my experience, and I may be heavily influenced because I'm a clinician, right? So I tend to work with individuals, is that if you want to put together your life, you can't use a stock solution. You have to use an individual solution. So going back to, does the addiction go deeper than I am lonely and want a girlfriend? It could, right? But for some people, getting a girlfriend will be enough. For some people, engaging in a relationship that offers authentic connection and has a sexual component will definitely help reduce the pornography use or whatever. And for some people, it may be insufficient, right? Because for some people who get a girlfriend, we've heard this a lot, by the way, that once you get a girlfriend, like the pornography becomes really weird and you get filled with guilt because you're watching pornography, because your brain is habituated to it, right? So it's not just like, it's not a psychological vulnerability. At some point, it becomes a habit. So now if I'm habitually addicted to pornography and I start having a relationship with a woman, I will feel guilty because like I have these habits, this habit circuitry that causes me to still watch pornography, because you can't drop it like you can't drop it like that. And then once I feel guilty, then what that guilt does is pushes me more towards pornography, because there's good evidence that pornography is used as an emotional coping mechanism. So the more guilty you feel, the more pornography you watch. The more pornography you watch, the more guilty you feel because you've got a girlfriend. And then you don't want to tell her. And then at some point she finds out, and then you're embarrassed and she feels upset. She feels like she's not enough for you. She gets concerned that she's not enough for you. And then she starts crying, and then you feel even guiltier, and it's back to the porno. It's like, it's a whole vicious cycle, right? And it comes down to understanding, what is the pornography doing for you? Is it a source of emotional coping? And once you understand that, then you can hopefully have a conversation with her, and you can have a conversation with your girlfriend. And it's like, hey, like, I've been doing this for a long time. Like, I really value you. I care about you. I find our sexual relationship to be gratifying. And, it's something that I'm working on. Like, and then like, it's also about like communications and asking questions, right? It's about asking your girlfriend, how do you feel when I watch pornography? How does it make you feel when I do this? Are you okay with it? Or are you not okay with it? Is it okay that like, I don't like it actually? Is it okay if I share that? Right? So it's about communication. It's about understanding. These are the bedrocks that we try to like instill in people in Healthy Gamer.